My initial reaction to this movie upon leaving the theater was quite negative, because sadly, it was exactly what I'd expected. I hoped that just maybe this movie could subvert my expectations in some way and actually be a decent film, but sadly it was not. Spies in Disguise is just another below-average 3D animated film aimed primarily at kids. So let me explain my thoughts. In a world where we have 2 Incredibles, 3 Despicable Me's, Big Hero 6, just to name a few, Spies in Disguise really needed to stand out in some way to be memorable amongst these other superhero and spy films. However, it just seems that the creators were more concerned about filling the movie with as many generic celebrities as they could, rather than creating a memorable or respected film. Blue Sky Studios seems to have doubled down on this celebrity approach recently, and it's really disappointing to see. Now being under Disney's umbrella, I doubt they'll change this anytime soon. So let me dive straight into my biggest problem with this film, the characters and story. For a good chunk of this movie, all the characters were very unlikable, and the story was needlessly messy. Our 2 main protagonists are Lance Sterling, an egotistical spy who's sort of a jerk, and yet everyone still loves him for some reason. We also had Walter Beckett, a young inventor trying to change the way people stop villains by making fun, cute, and overall harmless weapons. Initially, the movie starts out pretty strong, setting up both these characters, their backstories, and personalities. Though over the course of this movie, their arcs play out so artificially that it is jarring when out of nowhere they're suddenly cooperative towards the end. This movie follows the 8-point story arc template so closely and yet so poorly. It's a very simple story that gets needlessly confusing. Here's a very simplified version of the film's opening premise. After completing a thought-to-be successful mission, Lance returns to the spy organization. I don't believe they ever gave it a name. Anyways, he's accused of stealing a weaponized drone, and instead of cooperating, he just runs away. Eventually, he ends up at Walter's house and is turned into a bird. So Bird Lance and Walter now must find a way to change Lance back, stop the bad guy who took the drone, all while running from the spy agency. Turning Lance from a bird back into a human is a large part of this movie. However, the reason many of the attempts to do so fails is because Lance was apparently a female bird. Not to mention that once he's turned back into a human, he immediately kisses Walter, and then he realizes he's naked. They conveyed these scenes very childish and comedically, and well, you know what, let's just move on. Around the middle of the film, Lance and Walter are arguing, and Walter says something along the lines of, "There's no good guys or bad guys, just people." This was pretty confusing after this whole setup of the movie is a very generic kind of good versus evil premise, and it never really shakes that either. After hearing that in the movie though, I was sure an unexpected shift was coming to the overall film, but besides a few lines that suggest a similar viewpoint or concept, it was never explored any further. The villain of the movie is forgettable and painfully one-dimensional. He's really just like a cartoon bad guy. It states that Lance somehow hurt him in the past, but there's no flashback, explanation, meaningful context given. There's really nothing. I initially thought that maybe he was a former villain that Lance had fought and he wanted revenge or something, though upon looking back, this is probably incorrect. Maybe. Marcy is the government agent chasing Lance and Walter, and could have easily been a decent character in this movie, but she has to share all her scenes with eyes and ears. Characters that add nothing and have so few lines of dialogue, the film as a whole would have been a lot better off without them. There's also these other pigeons, and they add some decent slapstick humor, but honestly, they're just filler. Overall, the story is pointlessly busy and would have been a lot stronger if they just focused on the main characters, Lance and Walter. While the arcs and interactions may fall flat, another element of the story and characters that actually came out somewhat okay is the comedy. I mean, by far the best scene in the movie, and the one that had me legitimately laughing, was when Walter's house gets raided. It's so over the top and extreme that it's just hilarious juxtaposed to the fairly regular scenes before and after it. Later in the film, Lance and Walter are at a tropical resort, and the entire portion of the movie was actually fairly well done. We had clear motives, interesting interactions, some decent comedy, and strong visual design. And all these things set this section of the movie apart from the whole rest of the film. Looking back, it's the only part that I remember distinctly. The visuals were really disappointing for 2019. Character designs were generic, and certain proportions were exaggerated so much that they were just off-putting. The models, materials, and animations were also very bland, almost borderline Illumination style. The only visual elements that broke this mediocrity was Kimura's physics and animation, and the stylish opening credits scene. The music was a mixed bag, but it leaned on the better side. The original song, Then There Were Two, fit the spy, secret agent tone perfectly, but it was really poorly utilized during the film. While Spies in Disguise is not an atrocity or an outright terrible movie, it is really disappointing and is ultimately just forgettable. While this might be a fun movie for kids, there's also other movies that are suitable for kids that are actually decent films. I'd strongly recommend the original Incredibles, or a few of maybe Blue Sky's past films. Robots was actually really good. Anyways, I hope you found this review to be informative and entertaining. If you liked or disliked any aspects of this review, let me know in the comments. It's the first video review I've done in this style, so all feedback is welcome. Thanks for watching, guys!